All right, good morning and welcome to the annual Delaware Association of Realtors Legislative and Regulatory Forum. I'm Amanda Kelly Thompson, DAR's Director of Political and Legislative Affairs. Just want to make a quick housekeeping note before we get started. Everyone will stay muted during the presentation, but please feel free to use the chat box for questions or comments. During the forum portion of the event later, if you would like to be unmuted, please give us just a couple of seconds to do so. So today's presentation serves as a way for our members to let DAR know the direction they think we should be going when it comes to statewide legislative and regulatory issues. The Public Policies Committee's mission is to advocate for real estate issues that impact realtors and consumers, such as the protection of private property rights and support of the real estate industry, quality of life, economic development, the natural environment, business and technology, and public safety. This year, the committee, chaired by Bo Zebley, included 20 voting members from throughout the state. And during the session, they reviewed over 40 introduced bills and many additional documents and potential legislation. The committee for 2023, chaired by George Thomason, who I believe I saw out there today, will consider the information and feedback they hear as they review the current public policy positions and any upcoming legislation or regulations that may arise in the coming year. Today, we are pleased to welcome Speaker of the House, Pete Schwarzkopf, and Senate Minority Whip, Brian Pettyjohn, who will speak to state policy updates, and Andy Taylor, who will provide regulatory updates important to realtors. But first, we'll hear from Zach Rubin McCary. Zach is a senior political representative for the National Association of Realtors. He works with 9 states, including Delaware, New York, New Jersey, Washington, Oregon, Ohio, Alaska, and North and South Dakota, so all across the country. Prior to working for NAR, Zach worked on federal campaigns across the country and as a legislative staffer in Congress for Representative Sean Patrick Maloney of New York. Being at NAR is like coming home for Zach, as his first job in politics was actually an internship in the Government Affairs Department at NAR while he was in college. Zach is a Washington, D.C. native and a graduate of the Ohio State University. That's right, that's the right phrasing. So welcome, Zach, and I'll pass it over to you.
Well, thanks, Amanda. I would be remiss if I didn't say that, my degree from Ohio State requires me to, add the in. So I appreciate you including it so I don't get on the wrong side of the authorities there. So Amanda asked me to kind of just give you all a brief update on what we're working on you all's behalf in Washington, D.C. This has been a pretty busy year on the legislative side. As some of you may have heard, towards the end of last year, there was an infrastructure bill passed. There's, big time investment in there, one of the largest single investments in critical infrastructure in our country's history that President Biden passed. That was something that, there's money in there for housing, and, infrastructure spending is something that NAR has supported in the past. So we were, happy to see that. Most recently, there was also the Inflation Reduction Act, which the Democrats passed under a reconciliation package, which basically just let them do it with the clear majority. There was a lot in there, mostly to combat climate change and fund programs around that. But from our perspective, there were a number of tax provisions in there that we were concerned might have been included, and they were not. So, for those of you who participated in our mid-year meetings, talking to, your members about, the 1031 like-kind exchange, which was not included in there as a way to pay for those programs. There was no changes to the step up in basis, no changes to the net investment tax. Those were all kept out. So those were, very big wins on that perspective. Kind of looking ahead, the next few months, the main legislative thing that we foresee there being some activity on is funding the government. So on the 30th, so a little over a week from now, they will run out of funding. So they'll need to pass some sort of funding for that. So likely it'll be a continuing resolution since they are in the midst of an election. So my guess is that they'll kick it over to probably the week after Thanksgiving and work on it then. Most other energy right now is on the election. From NAR's perspective, we are really engaged in elections across the country to make sure our champions are, still there in November, or after November, I should say. So that, is a big shift with our advocacy group these next couple months, but we're also preparing for that lame duck session, which looks like it'll be in that kind of post-Thanksgiving time where, there could be a lot of movement on a spending deal. There could be some tax provisions that people want to look at. There also could be things, coming down the pike next Congress, like data privacy and institutional investors. So for those of you who engage with them, that's a big hot topic right now. So I anticipate we'll see that down the pike as well. But those are kind of the big things we're keeping an eye on. A lot depends on how the House and Congress net out. Democrats are optimistic they might be able to keep the Senate or maybe even gain a seat there. And then on the House side, my guess is Republicans will take it, but it'll be by a fairly slim margin. So depending on what that margin is, will kind of dictate where the negotiations start. So we're watching that very closely. But with that, I know you guys have some great speakers lined up after me. I wanted to open up for any questions or comments people have. I'll also put my contact information in the chat box, or Amanda has it so she can share it afterwards. So if anything does come up and you guys have any questions about what's going on in DC, please feel free to reach out. My job's to be a resource to you all, not just your staff. So, always happy to chat.
Yes, thank you so much, Zach. Does anyone have any questions for him? Any questions about what's happening at the federal level or the elections, anything? Feel free to put them in the chat box. All right, doesn't look like it. Quiet crowd this morning so far, but thank you so much, Zach, for taking time to chat with us today and providing your insight on what NAR is doing. I know our members appreciate the hard work that NAR does at the federal level, and we appreciate you coming and joining us today.
My pleasure. I appreciate y'all having me, and hope the rest of the meeting goes well.
Great, thank you so much. So we'll now turn it over to a statewide perspective with Speaker of the House, Pete Schwarzkopf, and Senate Minority Whip Brian Pettyjohn. So we'll get them all situated. Got one. Great, there you both are. So let me just do a quick introduction into these two legislators, and then we'll kind of open it up. But Representative Schwarzkopf has served the 14th district since 2002. He is a retired Delaware State Police captain and troop commander with 25 years experience. His district includes Rehoboth, Lewis, and Dewey Beach. And then Senator Pettyjohn has represented Delaware's 19th senatorial district since 2012. His district spans from the Delaware-Maryland border, west of Seaford and Bridgeville, to Macy's Landing on the Rehoboth and Indian River Bays. Before his current seat in the Delaware State Senate, Senator Pettyjohn served as Georgetown's councilman from 2008 to 2010, and then mayor from 2010 to 2012. So thank you both for joining us today. Lots of years of experience between the two, so I'm sure this will be a great conversation. I'll kick it off with a question so we can get started, if that's okay with you guys.
Sure.
Good morning.
All right. So to begin, with the busy 2022 legislative session that wrapped up earlier this year, just wanted to start with maybe some of the bills that you were both excited to get passed this past session. Do either of you want to start us out? Kind of what bills you were particularly happy or excited about to have gotten done?
Brian, you want to start? You want me to? He can't, he's muted.
Can we unmute?
There we go. Hey, Pete. Well, thanks, Pete. I appreciate you, throwing me to the wolves here first. So, this past year, there were a few bills that we were hearing from the realtors quite a bit about. One was rolling back the real estate transfer tax. I got a ton of calls and emails and personal correspondence from realtors up and down the state about that. And, it's something we introduced a bill to do. That it, I believe, went through the Finance Committee or the Appropriations Committee over in the House. And I don't think it was released from there. But it's something that going forward, it's something I think we should revisit, especially, since we do have, I think it's the highest or one of the highest transfer taxes in the country right now. And we're in a position right now where fiscally, we can do it. Things may turn next year, and it might be something that completely comes off the table as an option. But I think when we are in a position that we can do that, that's something that we need to do. Next bill that I got a lot of feedback on, especially from the rental community, was the bill that would provide legal assistance to tenants who are facing eviction. And it's something that I talked to a lot of the realtors about, a lot of the community organizations. I decided to vote against that bill. I just think stacking the cards in favor of one party versus another, especially when we have so many elderly people that are renting out homes that honestly can't afford their own attorney. They handle those things on their own. I think it's an unfair stacking against those property owners in terms of giving the tenants access to legal representation where we're not providing both benefits to both parties. So right off the top of my head, those were the two big things that I heard from realtors about. Pete, any more that you can think of off the top of your head? I'm sure some of the people, I recognize a lot of names here on the screen. So, if there are things that you heard or that you remember, feel free to throw them in the chat. But those were the two big ones that I got a lot of contact from realtors about.
So same here. Got a lot of, especially on the real estate transfer tax. The one thing we have to keep in mind with the real estate transfer tax, I don't have a problem with rolling it back, but we have to come up with about $117 million to replace it. That's what it meant last year, was $117 million for that 1%. We can't very well cut out $117 million out of our budget and just move on. We had I think we had a really good 2-year session. I think we had a really good last year. There's a lot of things to be proud of what we did. We had a lot of extra money coming in. A lot of it was one-time money. And the biggest caution we have to have is that we try not to expand government with recurring costs with one-time money, because you have to fund it again next year. The idea about having that money coming back next year and the year after is somewhat slim. They're looking 2 years out that we will be struggling again. Once you get a lot of money coming in, if you don't get that same amount of money, you're hurting. So bottom line is we tried to put money in areas that were one-time funding. We did expand a lot of things that I think we may have to pay the price at some point in the future. But we did a lot of good things. And the number one job for all of us up there is to pass a balanced budget. And we were able to do that. We crossed over the $5 billion mark for our budget. But we did a lot of things. We addressed a lot of issues that had been screaming for help for years. We did a 29% increase in funding for purchase of care. We funded the McNesby Act, which we promised to do, I don't know, Brian, how many years ago? 4, 5, 6 years?
5 years. I think
Yeah.
it's 5 years ago now. Yeah.
It took us that long to try to find the money to do that. We tried to address the pay inequity in state government. We raised state employees got a range anywhere from 2% to 9%. The 9% at the lower end of the rate, the range, and the 2% at the highest end. We did a lot of good things. I agree with Brian on the providing lawyers for people being evicted. I think it's a one-sided program that's going to benefit the people that are renting versus, there's this mentality that everybody who owns something and rents it out is rich. And that's not quite the case. And Brian mentioned it. If you go to the Modern Maturity Center, they have a new newsletter they put out in Dover. They have a newsletter that they put out, and they have widows and things that are trying to make ends meet by renting out a room or renting out the garage over top their, or the apartment over top their garage to try to make ends meet. They don't have the extra money to pay for an attorney either. So unless you're going to provide attorneys for both sides of the argument, I don't think we should be doing it at all. So, but that's that didn't pass in the House. It failed in the House by, I don't know, 4 or 5 votes, something like that, Brian.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So other than that, we had another major a record bond bill this year. We put a lot of money into our roads, like your previous guest was talking about the infrastructure package. We included $378 million for K through 12 education projects, including construction projects in Appoquinimink, Brandywine, Cesar Rodney, Cape and Loop, Capital, Christina, Colonial, Indian River, Milford, Smyrna school districts, as well as the 3 tech schools. So we're putting money in areas that need it. We put money in for extra money for bus drivers because we have a bus driver crunch. We can't keep our bus drivers because we're not paying them enough. There's a lot of different areas we touched on. We did the Family Leave Act, which is an insurance program for employees. We doubled down on our Clean Water Act and put more money into the Clean Water Act, which I think is very, very important. We have a lot of money we set aside for dredging. And now what does this have to do with realtors? That has everything to do with realtors, because if our waterways get clogged up, people aren't going to come here. I mean, the Pennsylvania Navy is not coming. So I hope I didn't offend anybody from Pennsylvania. I was born in Pennsylvania. I have the right to make fun of them. So, yeah, we touched a lot of big areas with the money. We dealt with our military people, our veterans. We exempted their pensions this year. We're kind of lagging in terms of other states that have been doing that. We helped our volunteer firefighters out. We did just a lot of good things all the way around. But I'd rather get to questions. And I mean, I have paperwork laying all over my desk here to give me numbers that I need to talk about. But I'd rather get to the points of things that interest the other people on the Zoom here.
Well, thank you both so much. That was very informative. You kind of covered a couple of questions that I had with the budget, but I think just kind of expanding on the budget a little bit, do you expect that a surplus will continue, or what are you hearing or expecting in the next kind of coming years that we could expect in the state?
So our DFAC estimates, basically they look at the current year funding and 2 years out, and the 2 year out projection right now is not the best. I mean, I don't think it's going to be negative in negative territory, but I don't think it's going to be, it'll be nothing like we had this year. Nothing.
Yeah.
Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, we've had more or less a windfall the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And it's not going to continue. You know, you look at the Fed. The Fed's looking to raise rates by 100 basis points, possibly 75, maybe. It's going to cool things down in the economy. One of the things that we've seen out of DFAC and out of our state budget, we've seen a lot of money come from our corporate franchise. With the hot economy, you see a lot of new companies being formed. You see a lot of companies do spinoffs. Those new corporate entities being formed, those are filing fees. Those are corporate income tax fees that come into the state of Delaware, which, honestly is one of the reasons why we don't have a sales tax here in Delaware, because that makes up what we would have in a sales tax if we were a sales tax state. So those types of things, it's a huge part of the economy, but it's one that I think smartly we don't count on year by year. The things that we count on year by year are your more reliable sources of income, your personal income tax. That's a base amount. Things like the regular corporate income tax, that's usually a base amount as well. These extra other things, whether it be things that are around the corporate franchise, a sheet, those are a lot of times the things that back in the past you would see on July 1st, a legislator's fined $200 million, in extra funding. Well, how do you find $200 million? Well, a lot of that is some of these as I call them, unreliable sources of income that DFAC says we're going to get, and we can plug that into the budget. This year was extraordinary with the amount of money that we had, but it's something that's not sustainable. It's not going to be a year after year type of thing. So we have to be really careful about growing our budget, our recurring budget. That's why you see us pass, instead of 3 appropriations bills, now it's 4. It used to be just the budget, your grant and aid, and your bond bill. Now we've also, in the past couple of years, we've had a supplemental budget bill, which has a lot of these other add-on type of things. So we don't build the base budget as much as we could. We put it in a separate bill, so it doesn't affect the base budget. What you've seen this year in the capital program is a lot of cash going into our bond bill. So instead of financing a lot of these projects out in the bond market, we put extra money that was in the budget into there for those capital type projects. And the number of capital projects that we've financed or that we put in there and have paid for through cash. The 2 courthouses, new courthouses in Sussex County and in Kent County. Usually they're bonded out. We're pretty much paying for all of those right out of the bond bill. So, these are things that smartly, while we're seeing this increase, and as Speaker Schwarzkopf alluded to before, one-time projects for one-time money. That was the governor's mantra. That's a smart way to finance government, because if we built our base budget, then when the economy goes down, then we'd have to find a way to plug that hole, and we don't want to have to do that.
Yeah, I will tell you, that coming out of the pandemic, we didn't expect to see the money that we had the last 2 years. It was unbelievable because, unemployment was up and everything like that, but yet our money was not down. They talk that we're skirting a recession or anything like that, but the economic indicators are all strong. The money's coming in. So I'm not sure. I think we're basically in an area where I think they have to rethink how they estimate this money and types of stuff. Brian was alluded to the sheet money, and even the lottery money was up 2 years ago, and we closed the casinos down for a certain period of time. So some of it doesn't make any sense. Unemployment's up, but yet our personal income tax was up. Now the unemployment's down, so we should be getting even more income tax. So when you get a push in one area, you have a drop in another area. It's so hard to actually figure it out. And DFAC, when they do their estimates and everything, they take a very, very, very conservative approach to it. We'd rather err on the side of having too much money than not enough money in our estimations, because that is what we base our budget on, is those numbers. So that's our goal that we try to reach, and try not to go too far past that. We did do some things such as the salary increases that are recurring costs. So we are betting against the fact that we will keep going in the right proper direction with people working and more money coming in. Minimum wage went up, so other salaries went up. More income tax will be coming in, hopefully. So there's a trade-off. And I mean, this thing is like the whack-a-mole game where you hit one and something else pops up. And it's all interrelated. And that's what I think a lot of people lose track of. When we try to pay for this over here, it's affecting something else somewhere else, unless you have more money coming in. So we have been very fortunate the last 2 years to have the money coming in. There has been, I've often said that we fund a lot of things in government, but we don't fund hardly anything properly. And our state employees is a good example. I mean, we had state employees that were on state assistance. They were on food stamps. I mean, there shouldn't be no reason in the world. We're the largest employer in the state. There's no reason in the world why we should have people on food stamps. So this was an attempt to help those people and to give them a better quality of life, and which is what we should be doing with everybody in our state.
Great, thank you both for that insight. I think that's a question a lot of us have as we kind of see all the news come in. This is what's happening now, what's going to happen in the future. Besides budget, do you see any other upcoming challenges that the state is going to face in the next couple of years that need to be addressed legislatively?
Well, I want to say one thing real quick. I think Brian will agree with this. Like I say, I have papers all around here of all the things we've accomplished in the last 2 years. But probably 90 to 95% of what we've accomplished in the state, we all agree on, don't we, Brian?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very high percentage. We
Mhm.
work together to try to get things accomplished. When we work together and get things accomplished, then all of you benefit, our state benefits. So there's very little things, and most of these things that we fight about are social issues, or maybe an ideological difference of how we should be doing something. But for the most part, we agree on a lot of things. The budget is always going to be front and center every year. That is the main concern that we have. I am rather concerned for 2 years out, but we'll find out more as this year goes on. We have deadlines. The corporate tax deadline is like in May, and so we won't know until we get towards that area as to where we're going to be on our budget. So the sheet money comes in late, and we never really know. Like Brian says, we found $250 million. Well, we didn't find it. We knew it was coming with the sheet money. We just weren't allowed to talk about it. We're not even allowed to have that discussion about what money's coming available, because you have to hold it for a certain amount of time. So we have an idea that we're going to get some of that money, but you're not allowed to have that discussion. So at the end of the year, that's usually where the excess money comes from, is this lost and found money. How's that? Going forward, who knows? We have a very interesting election this past time, and every new person coming in brings new ideas and new wants, let's put it that way, that they want to get done while they're in session. So moving forward, I always try to concern myself with the budget and the bond bill, those type of things that we know we have to do. And we are charged with getting that done by our Constitution. It's one of the few things that we are charged with. I do want to say one of the biggest things we put in place last year was the outside dining for the restaurants, which is what I think we credit the outside dining and the takeout alcohol for that first year, 2020, with keeping a lot of restaurants afloat. A lot of them say without that, they would have gone under. So that's another big thing that we tried to do, and we're trying to continue that. We did codify it into our statute this past year, and now some of the towns are coming on board and getting all these places licensed and ready to go. And I know Dewey Beach just had a big decision, and I think the Starboard got licensed in, and there's a couple others that have to have individual hearings. So, and that's what goes throughout the states. We're a little spoiled over here where I live. The restaurants have done really well this year, but they're not doing so well everywhere else, or in other areas of our state. And sometimes we forget that we have to create laws that will help everybody in the state, not just one area.
Great. So shifting gears a little bit to things that, our members obviously really care about. As I'm sure you both know, we have a huge affordable and attainable housing crisis in Delaware and across the country. So the Delaware Association of Realtors is working on a variety of policy initiatives and partnerships with other organizations and state agencies to address these challenges. But we'd like to hear if you have any ideas, or if you've heard of anything interesting across the country that would help address these critical issues, specifically in our state.
So I want to, here again, dealing with my district, which is a very affluent district compared to some other areas of the state. Affordable housing is a critical issue down here. We can't get the workforce here because we don't have any place for them to live that's affordable for them to live. And with the price of the value of the land, I don't know how we're going to do that. Unless and I'm not offering this up as a suggestion. Unless the state would buy land and start building houses, that's not going to work. But in our area, it's a little bit different than other areas because the price of land is so damn expensive. I'm not upset with that. I'm just saying that is one of the issues, and that's also one of the issues when it comes to roadways around here too, is the price of real estate when we have to purchase right away. Route 24 has been delayed for years and years and years because of the cost of real estate that we have to acquire for the right of way. So we're moving forward, but we're paying a heavy price for it.
Yeah, I've got to agree with Pete on that. My district spans from the Delaware-Maryland line west of Bridgeville and Seaford right now, and land's cheap over there, relatively speaking. Mm-hmm. And taking a look at the east-west roadways in the morning when people who live over on the west side go to work over on the east side, and then in the evenings where people are headed home, and you see just how many people commute across the county to go back and forth between the higher priced area where they have to work, whether it be over at BB. I know BB's a huge employer that has employees from throughout Sussex County, back to where they can afford to live over on the west side, somewhere west of 113. And it is an issue. It is a challenge, and unless we want to start playing with the market, and that's something that I'm absolutely against. That's going to be a reality. So we're going to be faced with improving the roadways, improving where people can go back and forth between where they work and where they live more quickly and efficiently. But in terms of affordable housing over there, as a government, without starting to tinker with free market pricing, there's only so much that we can do.
Great, thank you. So looking forward to next year, kind of in the same regard, are there any policy priorities that you're both hoping to get done, even specifically ones that, us at the association can help you with, anything you're looking to work on that we can partner or be helpful in?
We're waiting to hear from you as to what your priorities are for us.
So this time of year right now, it's difficult because I'm looking at the elections, I'm looking at the people that are coming in and everything like this, and as leaders, it's more about them than it is about you. So where I would like to see certain things, maybe primarily for my district, I don't know that that would be anything I push. Last year, I was very, very strong about doing the outside dining and take out alcohol. That was a big thing for the industry and throughout the state. So I was interested in that, but I'd like to take a back seat and let's see what everybody else brings to the table. A lot of these issues are social issues that you're either going to like or not like, whichever, as your organization. But we're here. I need to take this time for just a second. I think I need to offer an apology to some people during the hearing on the transfer tax. I made a comment based on my district, not the rest of the state. And while I know our district is doing fairly well, I was very quickly reminded that other areas of the state aren't doing as well with real estate. And I think I may have offended a couple of people, and I'd like to offer that apology if I could right here. So.
Yeah, well, thank you. We appreciate that. Obviously, it's sometimes hard to always know what's exactly happening. It's my job to track the whole state and how it's going. And it definitely, even street by street could change, what's happening in the real estate industry.
Yeah, and you got to realize, yeah, we're leaders in the General Assembly, but our first duty are the ones that elected us in the smaller districts. And a lot of times we have that vision of what's best for our district first. And then we also have to take in what's happening statewide. But, just for our Sussex County people, out of the leadership of the General Assembly, 5 out of the 10 leaders in the General Assembly are here in Sussex County. That's a tremendous amount of power that Sussex County has right now. And, we try to take care of Sussex County. When you look at the General Assembly at whole, I think that's where it balances out, where you've got more of the members that are outside of Sussex County than in Sussex County. And we take that all into account. As Pete, as Speaker of the House, he's got a tremendous responsibility. I don't know how he sleeps at night. Sometimes I really don't. And he does a great job for the state. I know that there's a lot of times where he's challenged between what Pete thinks and what Pete as the representative thinks and as Speaker of the House. And he probably argues with himself a lot. And I'm facing that a lot as well. So when we're looking at these solutions, when we're looking at these issues that face the state, it's a delicate balancing act to address everybody's concerns as it's needed, to address our caucus's concerns, and then the concerns as the state as a whole. But I'm sure with the new members in the General Assembly, we've got some new members coming into my caucus. We'll have some other members over on the majority side of the Senate. Pete's got some new members coming into his caucus. probably be some more in the minority side of his caucus as well. We'll have to see what that dynamic is, and that dynamic's not necessarily clear yet.
One of the hardest things that Brian and I have to do is when you understand both sides of the issue. It's a tremendously difficult decision at times. I understand the issue of the the RTT, but I also understand the other side of the issue with the money. So, would I like to reduce it? Yeah. Would I like to look at exemptions to it? Sure. To help benefit the other areas of the state? Sure. So we can look at that this year. That's one of the things we could look at. And if we're taking a piece of that and giving it back, that's a lot better than having to come up with $117 million. So, but that's an area that we can look at for sure.
Absolutely. We'll definitely be chatting about that, I'm sure, as we move into the next legislative session. What you hear from me the most about all the time. But yeah, thank you guys so much for all of your perspectives. I think we're getting close to our time here, so I just want to give you one more chance to share with the group anything before we wrap up, if there's anything else you'd like to mention or talk about before we move along.
I mean, look, you guys are a huge part of the state economy.
Yeah.
You provide homes for people, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for more home ownership rather than rentals. We know the benefits of home ownership in all our communities, and we're going to do what we can to help promote that and to help create an environment where that happens, and more people are able to do that. But you're the professionals. You guys know more than we'll ever know about real estate. So feel free to engage us. Feel free to talk to us about what you think should happen, even if it's an off the wall idea. Maybe it's something that we can use part of to push the ball forward a little bit in terms of what your goal is and what really our goal should be, and that's home ownership.
Yeah, both Brian and I have majority. Well, Brian has a couple chicken plants and things like that in his district, but my district is 100% small business, 100%, and a big part of that are you realtors and the services that you provide. Which is why, and this hasn't come up yet, but the Family Medical Leave Act that we passed, because of my district, I was able to get an amendment on there that says that basically if you shut down for 30 days or more, then you're exempt from the Family Medical Leave Act. I could not understand how anybody thought that was fair to take a business that's only open 8 months a year and put them under the same program that a full-time employer would be. So we were able to do that. In terms of looking out for small business. But the one thing Brian and I have to always remember is where we come from and the area that we serve, and it is small business.
Yeah, certainly.
Well, thank you both again for joining us. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules. I know with the election and everything happening, you guys are probably not getting a lot of sleepless nights, so we appreciate, or getting a lot of sleepless nights, I guess, but we appreciate you taking time and joining us today and sharing some insights with our members.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
So we're gonna move right along as we kind of get the everything situated. I'm gonna introduce DAR's legal counsel, Andy Taylor, who will address regulatory updates relating to our industry. Andy is named in Woodward White's directory as one of the best lawyers in America in the real estate field. And in 2010, he was recognized in Delaware Today as one of the top lawyers in the field of real estate law. He also lectures and teaches real estate brokers extensively and salespeople in the field of real estate law. I'm sure we're all super familiar with Andy Taylor, so I'll pass it over to him.
Thank you very much, and pleasure to be here with you today and talk with you some about current issues and particularly focus on some regulatory matters. I can't help but chime in on the tenants' right to counsel. And, our country is very focused these days on following the science as far as medical and following the data as far as what the Fed does. So a very interesting study came to my attention from the end of 2021 from the Department of Economics at Stanford University. A professor there did a study about the welfare effects of eviction and homelessness policies. And just, it's interesting what he found. He said, I find that right to counsel drives up rents so much that homelessness increases by 15% and welfare is dampened. In contrast, rental assistance lowers tenants' default risk, and as a result, reduces homelessness by 45% and evictions by 75%. So that's an 84-page study that professor did. I find that conclusion very interesting. And I think it's pertinent here in Delaware. The Delaware State Housing Authority is in the process of concluding, from what I hear, has been a very successful program as far as providing tenants with and landlords with some direct assistance. A lot of that came out of the COVID money. And so I think maybe we could find a way maybe to continue that success that DSHA has had rather than tenants' right to counsel. I'd be happy to send that report to anyone who'd like to see it. Another matter, we're all advocates for fair housing. You may be familiar with Senate Bill 236, which provides significant name change. The Division of Human Relations is now the Division of Human and Civil Rights, and the State Human Relations Commission is now known as the Delaware Human and Civil Rights Commission. And the synopsis to that bill said that the change makes clearer the role of the commission and division in ensuring human rights and civil rights, and helps differentiate the commission and division from the work of the Department of Human Resources and the City of Dover Human Relations Commission. So that'll be interesting to see how the division and the commission further implement and interpret that role of theirs now with that name change, looking at human and civil rights. So I see that as being a little broader perhaps than what the previous name indicated. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes and where we can plug into their efforts and help out. Giving you a little bit of regulatory update, since that's primarily what I was asked to focus on today. Effective February 11th of 22, new real estate instructors who are seeking to be approved by the Education Committee of the Real Estate Commission and then the full commission, rather than only initially being able to apply to teach a modular 7 elective, they can apply for their first instructor's approval to be for any of the 7 modules that they want to teach. They teach that one module. They need to get to the point of having 60 positive evaluations, and then they can apply to teach additional modules. So this was done at the request of the Real Estate Commission Education Committee in an effort to try to interest more people in being real estate instructors. So if you have an interest, it no longer needs to be just an elective that you first get approved for. And maybe you've taken a lot of the NAR professional standards courses, and you really pride yourself on your knowledge in that area of professional standards. So you could apply then for your first instructor approval to be for a module 2 for the professional standards. And so please, encourage yourself or others to step forward and perhaps become a new instructor approved by the Real Estate Commission and help educate your fellow realtor members and licensees in general. Another matter of regulatory update for you. As you know, the prior year, there were changes made by the Real Estate Commission with regard to advertising and also team names. So they did some refinement to that this year. Very rarely do any of us get anything perfect the first time, right? So the regulations went into effect before and lived with it for a while. There were certain suggestions made for improvements. And so here are some of the improvements they made with regard to first one dealing with team names. Effective June 11th of 2022, the team name may now include something that designates that you're a legal entity. So you could go ahead and include the word company or corporation or corp or Inc. or LLC, LP or LLP. If you're organized in one of those fashions as a team, you still may not include the words brokerage organization, realty, real estate, or realtors. They didn't want you to include, for example, realty or real estate, trying to reserve those words more for the actual brokerage organization itself. The commission, as you know, their primary objective is to watch out for the general public they always want the general public to be able to differentiate then the team from the broker or the brokerage organization itself. So if there is an issue in the transaction, they can remember that there's that broker or brokerage organization that they could turn to for further answers or help, or unfortunately, if need be, questioning or complaining about something with regard to the transaction. So they're seeking to help the public out that way. So that expands some your ability to show, for example, Inc. or LLC along with your team name. Also focusing on teams, they enhanced regulation 8.5.3.2 to make it clear that the broker is responsible for advertising of the team. They added the words including advertising and posting of signs. So it's not only that the broker is responsible for the real estate activities of team members under the broker supervision, but they made clear including advertising and posting of signs. And so brokers be aware of that. The Real Estate Commission in general continues to have a strong focus on the responsibility of the broker within the brokerage organization and the role of the office manager within the brokerage organization. So please take your role seriously with regard to that and make sure you do adequately supervise the licensees under your management. And in that regard, I would say anytime you have anything pending before the Real Estate Commission, unless it's just such the minorest little thing, be part of the meeting. They're doing them hybrid now, so you can go on by Zoom or you can show up in person. So at a minimum, be on the Zoom. So that if they do have some further question about what you're seeking to have an application approved for, particularly if it's with regard to a new brokerage organization, new brokerage name, new office application, new branch office application, make sure you have everything with your application as best you can before the meeting. Seek to try to have things reviewed by the staff there at the commission office. They're getting more back in the saddle as far as having gotten through the state of emergency and COVID and everything. So they're becoming a little more accessible. And then beyond the meeting itself, hopefully what you're asking for approval for, will go right through. But if not, hopefully one of the commissioners would see that you're there for that application and call on you. Or if not, you could speak up at the end of the meeting during the public comment provision. I've seen some things even where it's initially tabled or denied during the regular part of the meeting. They come to public comment and you could speak up and say, well, I was here on the application for so-and-so, and here's the explanation to what you were thinking of. And then hopefully a commissioner would speak up and say, oh, well, that explains it. And then go ahead and make a motion to not deny it, maybe at the most just table it pending you getting some additional paperwork in or something like that. I'd also say that if you're having any licensees within your or new people coming into your office who are seeking to be licensed, and maybe there's some little a little bobble on their application that they feel they're going to need to explain, and they're offered that opportunity by the Real Estate Commission, of course, you need to be on that meeting as well as the broker. And there need to be letters of reference and character references for that person you're seeking to have approved if there's any bobbles on their application of things that need to be explained. Because otherwise, I can guarantee a commissioner will speak up and say, well, usually the broker's here, or usually there's people speaking in favor of this person, or character references, and I don't see any of that. So I'd like to have this tabled now to understand more of that at the next meeting. So don't wait for that question. Be prepared to make it easier for the commissioners and offer them that material all up front. Another change they made, this is on office permits, Rule 8.7, Rule 8.7.2, and this deals with signs that include the team name. This particular part of the regulation doesn't take effect until December 12th of 2022. So coming up this mid-December, and it says that the permanent sign at the office location shall prominently display the name of the supervising brokerage organization. I think that's, all your signs complied with that already. And then if the team wants to be part of that sign, here's what it says. A team name may be included on the permanent sign, but the name of the brokerage organization must appear first on the sign and must be of greater size and visibility than the team name. So how did this come about? Well, they had a branch office application being submitted. It was a branch office that was going to be occupied primarily by a particular team. And they saw on the application for that branch office that really what was more prominent was the team name rather than the brokerage organization name. And so, as you know, last year they made real clear that the broker and brokerage organization name and phone number needs to be larger, more prominent than the team name and the team phone number, or the licensee's name or the licensee's phone number. So that once they saw that with that particular branch office application, they said, you know what, maybe they need to amend the regulations. So they went ahead and did that, but that particular part doesn't take effect, as I said, till December 12th. So if you have office signs with a team name more prominent than the brokerage, it gives you some time to change those signs. So that's what's going on there. By the way, if you have any questions, put them into the chat. I'll be happy to stop talking and take questions as well as we go on. I'm going to go into another little topic, the things being worked on. Like my DAR mug, I love this. I can sip on my green tea all day long. This is fantastic. All right, so the Delaware Real Estate Commission asked Delaware Association of Realtors to provide input to revisions to be made to the seller's disclosure forms. The last revisions, as you know, were 2017. So it really was overall time to go ahead and make revisions to the form. I mean, I don't know if can I do screen share?
You might be able to give you that permission. 1 second. You should be able to.
Should be able to. Okay. Screen share. Here we go. Council. Okay, so DAR Forms Committee was tasked with taking the lead on working on the proposed regulations. And that is a very effective committee with representation from all 3 counties.
Andy?
Yes.
It doesn't look like the document is up yet. Do you want to have a document shared?
Yes. You're just seeing that list, is that right?
Yep.
Hold on. Now can you see it? How about now?
No, I think you need to share your screen again.
Do it again, share again. Says I'm screen sharing. Can you see it?
Yep, now we can see it.
Excellent, good. So the Forms Committee, DAR put out multiple communications requesting comment from members as to suggested revisions to the seller's disclosure form. And they reviewed every single one of those comments. And so the Forms Committee had multiple meetings reviewing all those comments, talking through literally every question on the seller's disclosure form. One of the overall big things that we saw the need to look at was trying to make clearer to the seller completing the form what time frame was being talked about with regard to the questions. Was a question just focusing on the time frame that the seller has owned the property, or was the question intended to cover all complete knowledge of the seller, knowledge they may have had from previous owners, knowledge they may have had from tenants on the property, things like that. So that was one of the overall focuses with looking at questions. And when the DAR board looked at this as well, we realized there's still some refinement that needs to be done with making clear some of that timing as well. So I'll run through some of this with you. First of all, none of this is approved yet, okay? Don't be saying to your office, Andy said the seller's disclosure form has changed. No, it has not changed yet. It will still be a several month process. The work now goes to the Delaware Real Estate Commission. They have a subcommittee of commissioners who will be looking at this. Those are public meetings, so any member of the public, any realtor, any licensee, any member of the public at all can show up and provide your comment to the subcommittee. The subcommittee will work through it all. They will end up providing a draft to the Real Estate Commission, and then the Real Estate Commission will have meetings about it. And again, those are open as well. And then they will vote on it, and then it'll become effective. So, I mean, certainly we're not going to see this come about till sometime, I'd say, spring 2023 is probably more like what we're looking at. So the just to run through some of this is the red line version. I'd like to say, we would be absolutely lost without Matt Lafferty. So Matt Lafferty at DAR has been doing really all the work as far as with the committee, with trying to keep up with the very active committee meetings and typing things as we go along and cleaning things up after the meetings and sending them out to the members again. So thank you, Matt. I wanted to publicly thank you for all that hard work. He's amazing as to what he can do for us all. So you'll see it on the section dealing with occupancy, just some refinement to some of the wording as far as how's this property used right now, just trying to clean up some wording there. And then with regard to a property that's subject to a rental or lease management agreement, if the answer to that's yes, then attaching a copy of that management agreement so a potential buyer can see, is that something that can be terminated? Is that something that goes on in the future after they own it? That's the intention there. Then deed restrictions and homeowners associations. Is the property subject to any deed restrictions? Gave some examples for this: rental restrictions, pet restrictions, fence requirements. Seems that buyers are thinking a little more expansively about what they may want to do with the property. Maybe they're thinking that they're going to, Airbnb out a room, or that little what they think is a legal garage apartment, whether it is or not, and they're thinking they might be renting out part of it. So that's why rental restrictions was mentioned specifically there. Question right here, I guess it was 10, now it's 8, now it's going to be 10. Using the word inclusionary here, asking is the property subject to any affordable housing rather than just the word workforce or inclusionary housing requirements. For example, maybe the buyer, when they first purchased the property, they qualified for it by maybe it being purchased through the NSP program, the Neighborhood Stabilization Program. And maybe that has a restriction that goes on for another several years as to the new owner needing to also qualify as, for example, being moderate income housing. But that is more than just what's called workforce housing. It's, inclusionary is the more expansive term. So we thought adding that would be a good idea. And then I think some of this was just as far as the fees due, that was just, some of that was just moving things around. Is the property subject to a leasehold agreement? Again, this might just be moving around. And then here's where we're qualifying things, as I mentioned before, to your knowledge, are there any rights of way, easements, or similar matters? And I think that always was hopefully understood in that fashion of you're only answering to the best of your knowledge. And that's what the statute says, it's to the seller's knowledge. But we decided with a lot of questions to be very specific about that. So that's one, to your knowledge, are there any variances, conditional uses, et cetera? We took out the question about has a title policy been issued in the property in the past 5 years, because the 5-year time period is no longer relevant. That was relevant when the insurance commissioner's office for the Title Insurance Rating Bureau had what's called a reissue rate, a reduced rate for title insurance if there had been a policy issued in the prior 5 years. But left in to say, is a property currently covered by a title insurance policy, thinking that it could be relevant to a buyer or perhaps a buyer's lawyer if there's perhaps a title issue found within the title search. And then a new question here, question 30, did you participate in any mortgage/closing cost assistance program that must be paid back at the time of the transfer of the property? Did you participate in any mortgage forbearance programs such as the CARES Act from COVID-19? So unfortunately, as many of you know, through that CARES Act program, with some of the forbearance programs, it's not a forgiveness, it's a forbearance, so it needs to be paid eventually. And some property owners unfortunately didn't realize that in the pile of papers they were signing for that, it may have included a second mortgage that's now recorded on the property, or maybe it's the third mortgage that is $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 that they had from the forbearance that's going to be due when they sell the property. And so this is an attempt to try to jog the seller's mind. Did they participate in such a program? And that ties in with the question of basically, is it going to be a short sale? It's not worded that way, but that ties in with that question. And if it's going to be a short sale, is there money the seller has available to bring to the table? Or does it need to be negotiated as a short sale? Then in this next section, dealing with additional information to your knowledge, added to a couple questions. And then the question, what had been 32, was significantly modified. It was too broad before. It was well-intentioned when it was first put into effect in the very first seller's disclosure form. Basically, is there anything else you think you should disclose? It was made more specific. Have you received formal notice of any changes that may materially or adversely affect the property, such as zoning changes, road changes, etc.? We have found, unfortunately, through litigation, that this question was much too loose and too broad before, as far as asking basically, is there anything else? Because the way that question was then being utilized was if there was just something the buyer found after settlement and they thought, well, I think the seller knew about this. I wish the seller had told me about that. I think maybe the seller should have told me about this. They would focus back on this question, and it's something that was probably just furthest thing from the seller's mind that they would have thought to say something about that, or even think of that as being any kind of a material defect. So that was too broad there. So let's see, question here, try to help out. Okay. Okay, I'll come back to the escrow account question. Question about deed restrictions, property subject to county deed restrictions. Maybe that question needs to be looked at to clarify that. Okay, yeah, thanks, Monica. We can take a look at that. How will the seller know if they're currently covered by title insurance? Okay, so the seller, if they don't know, they should have their owner's title policy if they paid for owner's title insurance when they purchase a property. At a minimum, they could go back and look at their old HUD-1 settlement statement or their closing disclosure to see if there was a charge for title insurance. And then they should have had the title policy. If they don't, they could contact their settlement attorney from the time and try to obtain a copy of that if they want to have it handy. So that, or they could just answer the question unknown if they're not sure if they had title insurance or not, or they don't have that documentation. So that question 32 was made tighter and not so broad. Then this I found interesting. So question 39, to your knowledge, have there ever been cigarettes, cigars, etc., smoked in the property? If yes, describe. So when the committee was talking about that question, is that really, somebody have to know that was it ever? And so they said, yeah, some buyers are that sensitive and everything. They really want to know, has there ever been smoking of cigarettes, cigars in the property? So I think there's going to be a lot of unknown answers with that, but at least the buyer will know to check it out themselves then, which is a general overall philosophy of this form. And that is that it's not a warranty or a guarantee by the seller. It's the seller filling it out to their knowledge as to their answers to the questions. So if encourage sellers, if they really don't know, then they should be, answering unknown. Otherwise, they're on the hook for their yes or no answer. All right, going on to the environmental area, a lot of the questions again were prefaced on that with to your knowledge. Land, soils, drainage, and boundaries. Again, a lot of the questions to your knowledge. Or has there ever been, as far as the property been surveyed? Structural items, again, a lot of the questions being to your knowledge, making clear about that. The insulation part was just moved to another area. On Roman numeral 8, termites, we took out the word dry rot and pests, made it termites, insects, and wildlife. And have there been infestations, again, to your knowledge? And this, have there ever been infestations? And then down here is new question number 84, to your knowledge, are there now or have there ever been any bat colonies on the property? So this particular question, the way it's worded, is intended to cover all knowledge that the seller has, not just during their period of home ownership. And that's why the title to that area was expanded to include wildlife. The committee did have discussions about other matters that could be considered wildlife. Have there been squirrels that got in and caused damage, or there been snakes in the property, things like that. They decided not to go beyond bats at this point. Then again, a lot of the questions to your knowledge being prefaced with that, and some refinement here within the septic area. And when was it last pumped? If it has it been inspected in the past 36 months? Attach the report if it's available. And then if a septic system, how many bedrooms is a septic permitted to service? And unfortunately, there's been some circumstances where a septic may have been approved for 3 bedrooms. Somebody put in a 4th bedroom, whether they had a permit or not. And so that could be relevant then into looking at the capacity of the septic system to service that property. The age of the hot water heater. So if it's getting towards the end of its useful life, that tips the buyer off to budget for that going forward. And then just some of this with the heating and air conditioning was moving some of the questions around, putting solar in here as far as the heating system, the type of air conditioning, putting in the mini splits, and are there any contractual obligations that go along with that? I know I'm going a little quickly here, but this is all going to be available to you, and there's still the opportunity to provide more comment for this. As I indicated before, nobody gets it perfect the first time, right? So we'll certainly continue to welcome comments on this. Don't get concerned. It looks like these things were all crossed out. It's just they were moved as far as the boxes go. That's so the area as far as are these items in working order. There were some things added to this. See if I can pick out some of them. Solar lease, I think that was on there before. Water conditioner, fuel tanks. Anyway, I'm sorry, I can't pick out exactly at this point which things were added, but the committee looked at the whole thing here. Oh, here we go. Smart cameras, doorbells, smart thermostats. Some of those things were added. And as you know, we try to keep these boxes consistent then with the listing agreement and then the agreement of sale. And so when we're getting close to thinking the real estate commission will be approving this, and we know what this area of the form is going to look like from the real estate commission approval process, then the forms committee will go ahead and make the same revisions to the listing agreement and the agreement of sale to try to keep those consistent. So that's a rather quick run through for you, but gives you some idea of the matters that'll be coming forward from the real estate commission. I'll pause for a second just to see if there's any other questions in the chat area for with regard to the form here. Oh, escrow checks, I think was a question that someone had. And there are other questions. I'm trying to expand here so I can see. Amanda, just let me know if there's other things in the chat. So with a question was, did the form say anything about escrow checks, I believe was a question. So the seller's disclosure form does not, but at DAR, we are aware of that as being a current issue with regard to some brokerage firms not wanting to hold the escrow deposit money any longer and trying to put that on the settlement attorney. As you may know, in Maryland, there's a specific form that covers that lawyers and title companies and real estate licensees in Maryland and the Maryland Real Estate Commission got together on and worked on as far as a form. So the Forms Committee is aware of that as a current topic, and we'll take a look at that. And it looks like no other questions I hear on the form, so we'll stop sharing with that. And
Andy, I have a couple questions
Sure.
that came in, I think, directly to me, so but are for
Okay.
you. So the first one was, there's a growing concern with transaction coordinators being used in a lot of brokerages. Should they be used, or are they even required to be licensed?
Okay. So this kind of comes under the general topic of personal assistant, if you will. So transaction coordinator, it depends what they're doing. The Real Estate Commission past couple times of go rounds that they've looked at the regulations, tried to refine what a unlicensed person could do with regard to property management. So I would say if you're seeing concerns with regard to what transaction coordinators are doing, certainly they're not required, but I know they're very common for very some high volume agents and high volume teams that they have a transaction coordinator to turn things over to. So I'd say it depends on what the transaction coordinator is doing. If it's a matter of keeping communication going and things back and forth, and the settlement attorney's office informed of things and the parties informed, just that informational sharing and whatnot, they don't need to be licensed. But if there's something that's being negotiated, let's say with regard to the results of the home inspection, that negotiation needs to take place by a licensee, not a transaction coordinator, because that's specifically one of the roles of the licensee. So I don't know if anybody wants to expand further on that question, but thank you for the question. As you know, I'm very pleased to have had the privilege of representing you for decades. And as you know, things tuck in my mind, I make notes of things, I list the things. So as things come up for further topic and revision and opportunity with the Real Estate Commission or the General Assembly, then we get to address them. So thank you for that question. I'll put that one on the list for future consideration.
Yeah. Another one that came in are any other forms being updated, addendum or disclosures or anything else?
Well, the regular resale form is the first one we looked at as far as the seller's disclosure goes. The Forms Committee and then the Real Estate Commission will also be looking at the ones for the new construction and for the land. There'll be similar changes made on those forms as well. And we did reach out to the home builders. Sorry, Amanda, you'll know their current name better than I will. What are they called now? So
the Builders and Remodelers Association.
Right. Okay. I was glad to hear a little hesitation in your voice too, because
Yeah, I'm like, I
remembered
sometimes
exactly
just
right.
call them the home builders.
Home
too.
builders, right. So we reached out to their association in order to request input from them, and they provided some input. So we'll be taking that forward, of course, as well. We always try to cooperate and coordinate as best we can with other real estate organizations. So that's what will be going on there. As far as other forms, I think I saw, not to put you on the spot, Bruce, but I saw Bruce Plummer on the call here. I don't know if he's still on. Bruce is one of your members of the Forms Committee. He might know a little better. I can't remember off the top of my head. And as far as other forms go, another question here in the chat. Can you discuss anything that is being discussed regarding condominium structures, safety, reserve studies required? These things relate to financing of the units, current cost to owner and assessments in the future. Thanks for the question. Certainly another hot topic, particularly with regard to that building in Florida that literally fell down and think there's another real tragic building problem in Chicago just the other day. So now this is not really coming through this current subcommittee that I was talking about, but so there is another committee that comes under the Ombudsperson's office of the Attorney General's office. As you know, if you have any questions about condominium management or homeowners association or maintenance associations management, documentation requirements, etc. Chris Curtin, that's the name of the Deputy Attorney General, who is the ombudsperson in the AG's office. He was the first one, continues to be the one in that role. And amazingly, he likes it. This guy seems to thrive on there's some of those naughty questions that come up through condominiums and homeowners associations. So he has an advisory committee, and that advisory committee has a larger committee that takes a look at condominium and HOA and maintenance association issues. And they brought forward some more or less housekeeping legislation. I guess it was last session, not this current, anyway. And they're taking a look at other issues as well. So I know they're talking some about reserve studies. They're talking as well about the dollar limit for when the resale certificate needs to be required. As you know, there's no dollar limit with condominiums, but with HOAs and maintenance associations, that working committee is taking a look at that dollar limit as well, whether that needs to be refined rather than going up the 3% each July 1st when I revise my chart for that. And so that we can put more of that discussion in there as well. So the person who asked the question, if you have any particular examples of something, then send me an email or something. I'll put it into the mix with that ombudsperson's committee that's working on. And if you want to be part of those discussions, let Amanda know. We'll get you invited to those meetings. They've been Zoom at this point. All right. Some propane companies are not cooperating when trying to get the value of the propane at the time of closing, so seller can get reimbursed. Should this be disclosed on disclosure so the buyer knows they're aware to have to pay for a full tank after closing? Okay. So settlement logistics issue there as far as that goes with propane. Sorry to hear those companies are not cooperating. Always amazes me when you're trying to collect money for people and they're not cooperating. So I don't know that that's appropriate for the seller's disclosure, but sorry, I don't have an answer off the top of my head for that one, but let's certainly consider that. And anybody wants to provide me with further information for that offline, I'm certainly thankful for the input. And Maryland contract requires sellers to leave whatever's left in the tanks, oil, propane. Yeah, no, there is difference across state lines as far as reimbursement, not reimbursement. Here in Delaware, the thought has been, let's go ahead and have the reimbursement because we don't want to give the seller some incentive to run the oil tank dry, before closing. That causes other problems with some sludge getting further clogged up in the filter with the oil burner or heating system, and leaves the buyer with an empty tank. So then that's been the thought in Delaware as to having it be a reimbursable item. Certainly as a matter of negotiation, if that's a propane company that services that property and they're going to be trouble with trying to get the numbers for settlement, then you could negotiate on the agreement of sale to say that they would just be leaving that. There would not be a reimbursement, and it would be up to the buyer to pay for a full tank after closing. You could certainly negotiate for some provision with that in the agreement of sale. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions, but.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Andy. I'm sure Andy's going to stick around to the end. So if there are questions specifically for him, as we move over to the Forbes section, obviously, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer it, but we're going to kind of open it up more broadly. Now that we've heard about the legislative and regulatory issues, we want to hear from our members. We want to hear what you think the DAR Public Policy Committee should focus on and the issues you think maybe should be addressed through statewide legislation or regulatory advocacy. I'm just going to briefly, very quickly talk about a couple of issues that have come up this past session and a couple of years, just to kind of jog people's minds before we open up the forum. Obviously, realty transfer tax, we've talked about that issue and how it's a budget issue at the state. The DAR Public Policy Committee will continue to fight for the reduction of the realty transfer tax. This year, we had for the first time ever bipartisan support, so we're going to try and build off that. Overall, there was also a lot of bills that affected the rental market in Delaware. Quite a few of them were not passed this year, and a couple of them were, but we did see a lot of rental issues come up this year. DAR gets involved with economic development legislation, such as HB 205 or the EARNS Act, that established the Delaware Expanding Access for Retirement and Necessary Savings Program, or EARNS, which is a vehicle through which eligible employees may on a voluntary basis provide for additional retirement security through a state facilitated program. And lastly, DAR stopped a short-term rental tax bill from being introduced again this year. We see it pretty much every year trying to get introduced. We know that it would affect a lot of our membership. We do have a subcommittee of the Public Policy Committee that met earlier this year to review that legislation and draft bill, so that we could have some ideas and opinions on it as we move into the next session. So I'll now open up the forum, and much like we were doing before, you can feel free to put your ideas, comments, questions in the chat box, or if you'd like to use the raise hand feature, we will unmute you. Just give us a couple minutes to do so. And staff and members of the Public Policy Committee will be taking notes on anything brought up today so we can discuss it at our upcoming retreat scheduled later this year. So does anyone want to start us out with any comments or questions? Anyone want to be the first one? So thank you for anyone who's putting it in the chat box. Obviously, we'll take this into account as well. Donna just brought up the bright requirement that there is a commission included on the list there. There's no financial incentives for agents to show rentals. Thank you for that feedback.
Can I talk about the, this is Mia Birch. Amanda.
Yes, go ahead, Mia.
I have seen the couple of the agents actually now start listing wholesale deal. How do you feel about that, Andy?
So are they do have it as an actual listing? So
That's correct. They literally say it as an assignment to, they have a financial interest in the property and wholesale deal, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. And I have seen that it's only done by couple agents, and they are primarily, I guess, a membership in PA, and they have a Delaware license, and I just been looking at it, and they have several listings that popped up and doing that. And I'm not sure the statute or anything like that. If you could just kind of, let me know.
First of all, thanks, Mia. For in a larger context, I've been thinking quite a bit about the broader issue is the whole practice of wholesaling. Is that really the brokerage of real estate that needs to be done through a licensee? So my first reaction is, well, if they're listing it, I'm glad it's being listed, so we know it's being handled by a licensee, so that gives protection to the public that way. It troubles me more when I see advertisements of wholesale properties and it's not a licensee and it's not going through a brokerage at all. So I think that could be an issue that eventually could come to the plate of the real estate commission that they might deal with. And if you're aware of wholesale situations that are not going through a licensee, and yet it really looks to you like it is the brokerage of real estate, remember, you can file a complaint with the real estate commission and they can address it that way.
Thank you.
Monica, I think you have your hand up. Go ahead.
I do. I finally figured out where to find that in the reactions at the bottom. So I had a question on something completely different. I'm in a civic association and was told by the neighboring civic association we should have insurance for liability for a civic association. And looking at the cost of the policy, it's incredibly expensive. So the insurance agent himself said civic associations should seek sovereign immunity, which fire departments have. And this impacts people who own property in Delaware because you try to seek good volunteers for your organizations, but if liability insurance or in a litigious society, if that's a problem, that could put somebody out of the opportunity to raise their hand to volunteer. So I'm curious, since that impacts real estate, if that's anything we could investigate. Sovereign immunity for civic associations. And certainly you'd have to make sure it didn't allow for egregious behavior or obvious harm caused by them. But so there's a thought.
Great, thank you, Monica. Anyone else have any other comments, questions? I know a lot of you put it in the chat box, so we'll obviously take it, all of those into consideration as well. Kind of do one last chance for any comments, questions.
I'm
anything
sorry, I
else?
have one. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Andy, talking about the advertising and sign regulation, without any enforcement, I have not seen any enforcement taking place since we put the regulation. Now there's a revision to it. And is there any like enforcement coming, or we're just gonna have to let
Yes.
a lot of agents doing whatever they want to do?
Yes, from what I've heard, there've been over 40 complaints filed with the real estate commission, and those are somewhere in the pile of the various complaints being investigated by the investigators of the Division of Professional Regulation. So I certainly share your frustration with the time that it's taking, but there will eventually be some discipline meted out to people who have not complied with the advertising regulations.
Thank you.
And remember, they can fine now up to $5,000 per violation. It's no longer 1,000, so that they can issue up to 5,000 per violation. Had a real good suggestion. He's on the call, so I don't want to call him out with it, although it would be crediting, I think, with what's a great idea. And one of the people on the meeting here made a suggestion to me the other day that perhaps with things like that, there could be a simpler process that real estate commission could maybe put into effect of, here's a picture of the sign, here's your fine. It's pretty cut and dry as to whether it complies or not, rather than having to go through a big long investigation process and filing a charge and the AG's office being involved and things like that. So that's something that would take a statutory change, but I have it on the list. So to the member who's on here that made that suggestion to me the other day, yes, I do listen and I keep track of things, and we'll put it in the mix. Okay.
Great, thank you. So I'm gonna wrap it up here. Obviously, if you have anything else, feel free to put in the chat. We'll leave it open so I can take some notes off of it. All the direct messages and everything that we received. We really appreciate it. So thank you to everyone who joined us today and provided feedback. Just want to make a couple quick announcements before we wrap up. If you have not already signed up for the Realtor Party mobile alerts, make sure you do so by texting the word realtors to 30644. This is one of the main ways that we help accomplish our public policy goals through the help of the vast membership that we have. These mobile alerts are the best way for you to help the Public Policy Committee make an impact directly with elected officials throughout the state. Thank you. Wes put it in the chat so you can see the number and the word. I promise you won't just be bombarded with text messages. Anyone who already receives them knows we try and use them sparingly. So if you have not signed up, please do so. And secondly, none of our advocacy efforts would be possible without the help of RPAC. RPAC helps enable realtors to support candidates that support the issues that are important to their profession and livelihood. I'd like to personally thank all of our RPAC investors on this call today. There are 2 RPAC events coming up, the first one being tonight. You can join KCAR for their end of summer and RPAC cook-off barbecue starting at 5 o'clock p.m. at Evergreen Farms. I'll be there. I think it's going to be a great event again. Or if you can't do that, you can join SCORE next Thursday, September 29th at Nassau Valley Vineyard starting at 5 o'clock p.m. And if you can't do either of those events, you can always make an investment in RPAC through your local association or even on the DAR website. Investments in RPAC are critical to our advocacy efforts at the federal, state, and local level as we continue to fight for real estate issues that impact both realtors and our consumers. And then lastly, we will be opening applications to be a state political coordinator after the election in November. SPCs are paired with members of the Delaware General Assembly and are responsible for maintaining a good relationship with their legislators and communicating with them on DAR's public policy positions. If you're interested in being an SPC or if you have any questions about it, feel free to reach out to me, but we will be opening those applications at like early November. If there's any other questions? Oh, yep, Stephanie, thanks for adding that to the chat as well, if you're interested in attending their event. But thank you again for joining us today. We really appreciate all the feedback and information and your dedication to DAR advocacy efforts.